I'm really pleased to introduce Debbie Trice. Debbie and I met in Rosemary District Association lives. We both lived in Cityside for a period of time, and I've gotten to know Debbie both as the RDA and her as a candidate. A delightful, bright, thoughtful person, and that's why I personally supported her in the campaign and delighted to see her elected as our commissioner. She and I talked earlier today, and I think something a little bit different than with our former guest speakers. She suggested, because she's relatively new, that she'll keep her remarks quite brief and leaving that much more time for discussion with her. So, Debbie, I think some of you will have seen her bio from when she was campaigning. She might talk just a second or two about some of her background and so forth. But we're delighted to have you, and have a seat.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I was anticipating I was going to have to stand, which in a sense is a little bit difficult because I am really still in listening and learning mode. You want me over there?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. I've been in office now for 3 weeks, have not had an opportunity to take the mandatory briefing on sunshine law, so I'm reluctant to say too much about things that are coming before the commission. But I do want to hear from you. I really appreciate being invited tonight. One of my concerns as I was running is there are so many neighborhoods and in general in the city that people have partial information, or the city has not been as forthcoming as we would wish, and people are jumping to conclusions which sometimes turn out to be wrong, or we have conspiracy theories. And I myself am learning, oh, gee, I was wrong when I thought this was why we were doing thus and so. So I want to make sure that I have plenty of chances to find out what your concerns are, being able to clear up things where you wonder, and if I happen to have an answer, so that I hope to come by and participate many times. Please invite me, please contact me. And one of the things, again, that I learned over the last couple of months, frequently we wait and make public comment at commission meetings when an item is on the agenda. But what you have seen for the last 2 commission meetings, and Victor McTeer was actually there, if you come at the very beginning of a meeting, you can make a comment on something that's not on the agenda, and that gives you an opportunity to plant a seed in the minds of the commission members. Maybe we need to put that topic on the agenda at a future meeting. And if you miss the 9 a.m., you can come at the end of the meeting, and you have seen that happen at the last 2 meetings. So I will encourage you, when there's something on your mind, to come to the 9 a.m. portion of the meeting and express your concern and get the commission thinking about the issue. So as far as some of the hot issues, they keep changing. My hot button is still going to be housing for low and moderate income working families and longtime retirees, because they really are being pushed out of our housing market. Obviously, the future of the Van Wezel and the issue of the proposed Sarasota Performing Arts Center, and I keep those 2 separate. I don't think at this point it's an either or. So I want to learn more about both the possibilities and figure out what ultimately is a good long-range solution for all of Sarasota. Talking about information and transparency, I want to encourage the city not only to be more transparent and be more open, also to provide that information in a fashion that we can understand. And I don't know if you saw Monday's commission meeting with the discussion of the missing middle housing. The initial descriptions were text defining what it was and how much you could build. And I said, would you please put that in plain language and say, in a typical parcel in that neighborhood, you could currently build 1 unit, and if this passes, you can build 4 units. And if you do that, one of those 4 units has to be for low or moderate income, well, low income below 80%. So I said, give us some real numbers that we can relate to rather than, you know, this text definition. So I'm going to encourage more of that to happen. And the reason I also bring that up is an issue that the commission has gotten over 100 emails within the last 3 days, has been what is called parklet outdoor dining. And a lot of this total misunderstanding of what that is. It's not the end of outdoor dining. The intention was during the pandemic, when there was very little business in downtown and parking was not in great demand, the city said, hey, as an emergency basis, we will allow restaurants to take parking spaces from Main Street that are in front of their restaurants and convert them temporarily to dining. Now that the economy has returned back to normal and a lot of people are coming downtown to say, where can I park? It's no longer in the public interest to assign those parking spaces to an individual restaurant. So that provision was going to be sunsetted on December 31st, but it was not going to be the end of outdoor dining. It was going to return parking spaces to the public. And the name parklet, my first reaction is, oh, are you talking about the use of parking spaces? And I was reminded that other cities, they use the term parklet as a mini public park. So even if we're talking mini public park, right now the provisions are enabling a single restaurant to take over that mini public park rather than make it open to the public. So right now we're looking, well, the city attorney, Bob Fournier, is looking at how other cities have handled it because of the, you know, public benefit issue of the use of streets, and what we might do. And in order for him to have enough time to make that assessment and make some recommendations, the outdoor dining in the public parking spaces has been extended to the end of March. However, they will no longer be free. The restaurant owners will be charged for the use of those parking spaces. But again, it's extended to the end of March, at which time we hope to have another alternative. I suggested that some of the restaurants might want to negotiate with their neighbors to use some of their sidewalk space. Or if the neighbor is another restaurant, maybe hop over and, negotiate with a retailer a ways away. Another option is defining the parklets as public parks and let the restaurant owners deliver to any of those little public parks. And Patrick, I see you shaking your head, and after I made that suggestion the other night, I realized the downside, and you can express that concern. The downside is these would be public parks, public. So some of the homeless individuals might decide, hey, this is a great place for me to sit down and enjoy our Sarasota weather. So, there are pluses and minuses, and as the suggestions come through, I anticipate all of you will feed your comments into city staff, city hall, and also I would be interested in you expressing your preference for, let's go ahead and have dining in parking spaces, or no, we want parking spaces returned to public use. So these are things that obviously affect you directly. And I hope that within the next month or two, you'll express, a little bit of your input based on some more information that I hope that I've given you some information you didn't have before. So my thing really, I came here to listen and hear. I brought a big notebook with me, so I do want to take notes. So I'm gonna turn it over to both comments and questions. Thank you.
Going around the room, who would like to start off? Anybody?
If I may, but we happened to be downtown last night, and of course there was nowhere to park on the streets, but we have parking garages. So it was very simple to drive, a block and a half, park in the parking garage. Fortunately, the elevators weren't working, which is another story. But at the end of the day, there's plenty of places to park. And I don't know, have you heard much from the restaurant owners? Is this something that they want to continue with? I know there are people who live in this building that will not eat inside a restaurant since COVID. I mean, they just won't. And without outdoor dining, that business is going to dry up for some of those restaurants.
Well, unfortunately, right now, of all the restaurants downtown, there are only about a dozen that are using this expanded outdoor dining. So is it fair if it's just that dozen, and is it fair if other retailers say, hey, my clients want to come and park right in front of me, and they're not going to carry their parcels to a garage, so
Oh, I know. It's balancing.
but I'm glad to hear you express your,
Yeah, well, the comment I would make is that the major attraction for downtown is dining. We've got 85 to 90 eating establishments, and whether we like it or not, that has dominated downtown. The idea of, and Bob has mentioned it, my wife and I rarely, if ever, eat inside. We prefer outside. I had lunch today downtown at Classical, across the street over here. And there were 12 people eating inside and 84 outside. There was 24 parking spaces theoretically, generate around 4 million in income for these restaurants. So I think this has some complex issues to it that, and I go back to the parking. We got over 1,000 new spaces downtown since I moved here, with the Whole Foods, with the Mark, with Promenade. Avenue.
State Street.
State Street. No, I won't tell the story. A store owner said that customers, if they couldn't park in front, would drive out to University Town Center and shop. I wonder where they park. But anyway.
Well, let me, something that I didn't mention, one of the issues is the use of the public parking spaces for private use is illegal. And it was possible during the emergency of the pandemic. So, yeah, possibly they could be converted into public parklets for public purpose, but not dedicated to an individual restaurant's use.
I would like to respond to that briefly, and that is, when the city remodeled the Metropolitan Main Street, they put out bump outs to make it safer for pedestrians. And those are that's part of the public space that it was on. And now we have a whole series of restaurants using that public space.
And that may be part of what would be removed. I don't know.
Well, if you're going to ruin the downtown restaurant.
Well, but I mean, again, it's the issue of public use, private use of public space. And I mean, I'm gonna have to defer to the city attorney, but he made it very clear that the use of the parking spaces couldn't continue for private use.
Well.
Yeah, and.
Okay,
Well, I think
Oh, yeah.
Roger has made a point here, but maybe it wasn't as obvious as it ought to be. This is an economic development issue. And we are generating far more economic activity, $4 million a year, from the use of those spaces for dining than we are in terms of revenue for parking. And what is it, $43,000 a year for that? So we can deal with it. There's always, where there's a will, there's a way, as my grandmother used to say when I was growing up. There's a way to deal with it. So let's not get hung up on the legalities.
And that's why City Attorney Fournier has the next 2+ months to do the research and come up with what would be legal. But again, my early suggestion is go ahead and make them public dining areas and let the restaurants deliver to them.
I think that concept is basically like at a mall, you have the food court. You go to restaurants and get what you want. And there are quite a few times, those who go out on Saturday, they like the coffee here, but they have lousy pastries, and there's a block down isn't good at pastry. So where do you have to go sit at one. You can't sit at the parks because there's no tables in any park anymore. So we need public spaces, and if there's a way to do it that the parking space usage is public, but if they have a sidewalk permit, they can still restrict that to their diners. Now, if they can still bifurcate that, that would open up the space, but the restaurants could still serve it.
Or
Consideration.
something that you said, why couldn't we put some more tables back in parks?
And maybe some benches too. That would be nice.
Yeah, another issue for,
Okay.
yes.
Any more
It was
board
good to
comments?
get-
Yeah, Wayne?
So, thank you, Commissioner. I sat on the Downtown Improvement District Board, the incoming chair in January, and we had a discussion on this, and City Attorney Fournier came and addressed us this week, Tuesday morning. And we spoke about this issue and have the opinion letter that he made for us on this exact point. We're very supportive of these, many members of the board are supportive of the continuation of outdoor dining. The solution we thought, and offered up a discussion on this. First of all, we've been asked for a $400,000 contribution from our bid budget, which is taxpayer money, our self-taxing district in the core of downtown for the redesign of Main Street and the parking. So maybe those parking lots and parklets could be handled through that redesign, which I understand is coming up in the CIP plan in the next coming cycle. So that was one piece of the concept. The other one is that if you're going to charge the restaurant owners the fee was gonna be approximately $25 a day per parking space to the restaurant owners for the use of that space, of the public space. That money, we thought, could be collected into a fund, and it would provide 2 golf carts for each garage to run people that may be 90 years old that want to park in the garage or have it put up in the garage and valet them to their, in a golf cart to their particular restaurant or the shopping desire they need. So you can call back that number on a cell phone, they pick you up, and take you back to your car. That was one concept that came up with in a short notice, of putting our heads together and how do we solve this thing without taking away the vibrance of, we fought 3 years to put the street lights up. To get those lights on the trees would take a break. He wasn't interested in that for years. Did finally paid $300,000 to put the lights in the trees. So we're very proactive, and we try to help you and the other fellow commissioners beautify the city. We're all about the infrastructure and all about commerce and the health of our merchants. So it's very important to the health of the downtown. When you go downtown without lights, without restaurants outside, you might as well close them downtown again, because that's what it looks like when it's dark. There's nothing out there. So appreciate your help and your willingness to listen and work on this matter. It's of utmost importance to the city residents, I believe, and the restaurants' survival.
Thank
Because
you.
they're faced with very high inflation, and people think they're making a fortune on the streets, but they're struggling with staff, struggling with inflation of food costs, and trying to survive in their businesses as well. Thank you.
And thank you for those ideas. And if anybody else comes up with some thoughts and suggestions, I did suggest to Jonathan Van Dyke of Duval's that he work with Mr. Fournier to make some suggestions. But again, any ideas are welcome and appreciated.
Yeah, one of the things that I do understand from the merchants is that, the hours of operation are so different for each of these, and some of those outdoor dining spaces are kind of vacant when store hours are in operation. So they're left on the street, restaurants aren't open. It kind of is a roadblock to, parking. I don't know if these things can be made a little bit more portable where people would have to take them off the street. I do see some restaurants that do that. And then there is parking available. So do you not understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, because at night, these retail spaces aren't open anyway. I mean, rarely do we have retail open in the evening, not like on St. Armand. So this would be more of a, maybe it would help both sides, but I think it's redesigning the way that we do the outdoor dining. There's got to be some best practices in other communities that make them more collapsible
Yeah,
and
it's-
elevated.
Yeah, it sounds like what you're saying is if for a restaurant that's using space in the parking area, that be very mobile furniture so that they don't put it out maybe until the evening when the
When they open
retailers,
at 5 o'clock.
Yeah.
I mean, some restaurants start serving at 4 or 5 o'clock.
so that they could have the more solid stuff
Sure.
on their sidewalk restaurant, but and maybe even, they could gauge in the middle of the summer when it's raining all week long in the evening, they may choose not to put out as much outdoor dining if they have,
Sure. I do know that there are a couple of restaurants who are open during the day, but they're not very populated. And maybe they still could do their outdoor dining, just not use the park spaces, because in the evening they do overflow. So there might be a workaround of that.
Just one, in the interest of time, I've got one last thing that we won't be able to go into detail, but one of the things important to DSCA and our members is the zoning text amendments that are going to be coming up. And the so-called effort for meaningful community input. I have a meeting tomorrow with Steve Cover and others to discuss the process for what meaningful, and one of our potential concerns is what's meaningful to one person is not meaningful. We would submit that the leading up to the comp plan changes, there wasn't the degree of dialogue and quality dialogue that should exist. So we will be lobbying, if that's the right word, to kind of fix that. You have in just a a little bit of time. Any
Yeah,
comments
well,
on that?
no, actually, I'm very glad you brought that up. For city commissioners who have not been involved with CCNA, they are unaware of the meaningful public input process and proposal. And I suggested to Lou Acosta that somebody come to that 9 a.m. the next commission meeting, which won't be until January, to let the commissioners know this is something that is being worked on with CCNA, with city staff, and here is our concept, here is what our objective is, so that you can gradually bring the commissioners along to understand what's coming. They have no idea that this is coming. So if you ask them, they'd say, well, the development process is either administrative review or it's, planning, public meetings. So I see meaningful public input process as being better than either of them and it coming first. But commissioners who have not been involved in CCNA have no idea, and you should really tell them about it and tell the public. And the 9 a.m. slot at commission meetings, I think, would be a good start to start telling and selling.
Okay. And just a final remark on 3D modeling, part and parcel of what.
I haven't gotten to that point yet.
Is to complement these zoning text things with seeing models of what outcomes could be related to affordable housing or whatever. So I'm gonna have to cut it off.
Can I just say
Sure.
one thing, since we were talking about restaurants? This will be fast. There has been some concern about what do we mean by food when you talk about certain restaurants or bars are able to stay in business if they 51% or whatever of their revenue is from food. What is the definition of food? Because some people think popcorn is sufficient. So I would be I'm going to start asking that we define food in the ordinances. So if you have suggestions of, this business shouldn't be able to do it unless the food includes something that meets some definition. So please provide your input. Thank you.
Debbie, thank you very much. Welcome to DSCA. We will likely have you back and expect some cards and letters from us.
Thanks.
Okay. All right.